somewhere along the way, the idea of victim consciousness, our experience of feeling victimized by the world, became this experience of shame. It's a very interesting concept I want to talk about today. Is I want to honor our right to feel like victims. Victim consciousness is an experience that I think we all are familiar with because it's a crazy world that we live in. But the spiritual communities that have been springing up are rightfully questioning the identification with victim consciousness, but I think what's happened is that we've become ashamed to feel what we feel. So in all the work I've done with ayahuasca, one of the prominent things that she illuminates and elevates is our right to feel the whole spectrum of the experience of being human. And the relationship with victim consciousness, it's a complicated one, right? Because one of the principles of awakening is recognizing that everything is happening for us. Every single thing we are co-creating in an unconscious and sometimes consciously magical way with the universe, right? So we're not victims. At the same time, sometimes we feel like we're being beat up by the world. Last week I talked about getting arrested and going through the process of being thrown in jail and criminalized for my sacraments, for the work that lights up my heart. I felt like a victim when I was thrown in jail. I went into a spiral of it, of like, what the hell is happening? I was angry at ayahuasca. I was angry at the earth for feeling betrayed. I was angry, of course, at the system. And at the same time I was feeling that, I felt shame that, I was also shaming myself to feel all of these things which were very normal. So I had a lot of time to meditate with my time in jail. So I sat with it of like, okay, what is the real teaching here? And calling in ayahuasca and bobenzana and the plants that I've worked with, of like, there's a conflict. I feel a certain way, but I'm programmed by the spiritual world that I live in to say that I'm not allowed to feel that. That sucks. So ayahuasca, in her wisdom, basically opened up this container, as she always does, this spaciousness, and helped me to remember that the idea here is that we don't become identified with the feeling of being victimized by the world, but we allow the related emotions to be processed, to flow through us, which is it's a wonderful dichotomy, right? At one time, we know that we are accountable for everything that we're creating, but there's also this part of us, especially on an egoic level, that isn't really controlling or in charge of what's happening. And I know that my ego felt totally victimized by my soul's choice to create this rite of passage, to go to prison and to deal with the legal system. And to dishonor one or the other felt like it was out of integrity. And so ayahuasca and my plants, they were like champions for the permission to feel. It's just become perpetual that in spiritual spaces, we're reliant too much on this thing. Actually, in all spaces, we're way too reliant on a mental understanding. And so I call this the all good syndrome. Like when we wake up to the idea that victim consciousness isn't true, we want to mentally force ourselves to be in the space of not feeling like a victim, but it's not up to the mind to determine what it is that we feel. So what I've been pushed into myself recently is a deeper permission to feel anger, shame, sadness, fear, all of it, without the identification. There's no attachment of, I know I'm not a victim on the big picture, but to let those things actually be part of the experience of being human. I mean, we live in a super crazy, intense, wild, wonderful world that's bringing out all of these feelings, and to mentally tell ourselves that we don't have permission to feel that because we're not supposed to be victims. The all good syndrome, when people say it all the time, I'm all good, it's all good. You can feel if they don't mean it, or more importantly, we can feel if we don't mean it. I had a spiritual teacher once that forbid me from using that expression for a period of time, because it was just this mental bypassing of, but it's all good, on the highest level, it's all coming from light and love. And while that is true, if it is not our personal experience to feel the truth of that, then we're lying to ourselves. Even though the principle itself is true, if we're lying about how we feel, then we're not in integrity with being in alignment with this beautiful spiritual principle. So the dance that ayahuasca invites us all to do is to know, of course, on the highest level, we are creating the entire experience that we're having, but to also honor the inner child and the ego and the part of ourselves that feels like life is out of control and that things are happening to us. We get to be both. We get to be the super conscious co-creator, and we get to be the being that feels like a piece of popcorn being tossed around by the craziness of life. And so when I was sitting in that jail cell, allowing both experiences to be true, that I've created this, I'm accountable, and also I feel wholly betrayed and victimized. When I allowed that spaciousness of I get to be all of it, which is so ayahuasca-esque in her teaching, everything became true and everything became allowed. Like there was no more shame in the container of my experience. I could be the parent consciousness that knew it was all magical, it was all intentional, holding the part of me that was like, oh my God, this is crazy, this is hard, this hurts, I'm scared, all of it. So, short and sweet reminder to all of us today to stop shaming the experience of feeling like a victim. We can allow those feelings that come with this intensity of feeling out of control in this world without becoming identified with it. Before we woke up, all of us were identified with the idea that the world was doing something to us. When we work with plant medicines, when we get to be on this journey of awakening, it feels so good to know that's not true, but we want to be in integrity with how we are feeling, because that's the truth of what's in our space. So Jane is asking, does this concept bring me to a place where it's all good? Yeah, actually, because if we allow all good to contain the experience of anger, shame, fear, sadness, all of it, and we allow those things to be good as well, yeah, then we can actually mean it. But typically when we use that expression, it's all good, we're bypassing, we're trying to bring ourselves out of the experience of what hurts and what is painful to process. So if all good contains the experience of also feeling like we're victimized by this world, well then heck yeah. But I don't know that most of us mean that, because it's a spiritual bypassing technique to try to avoid. And the more I work with ayahuasca, the more it's just like undeniable that the truth of my experience lies in what my body is expressing and what I'm feeling, not what I'm thinking. So I can tell myself, everything's fine, but we've all done this, right? I'm great, the big fake smile. And right underneath the surface is pain and fear and resistance. And I watch all these spiritual spaces shame those experiences and it kind of perpetuates this overtly mental attachment. Enough with that. My invitation to all of us is, can we support each other in feeling these things without feeling like we're supporting a perspective of victim consciousness? So I get to pretend I'm a victim sometimes. I give myself that permission to be like, God damn, this is intense, this is hard, this is painful. And to parent myself through that. I love thinking of it that way, that the little girl inside of me gets to feel these things. I can get to a space where I'm actually fully embodying the awareness that I never was a victim, that everything is happening in my favor. So that is the call to action today that I felt called to share with everybody, is to honor our experience of victim consciousness. No more shaming. Ayahuasca calls shame the most destructive emotion that we experience because it's built on a lie that we've done something wrong. And all of these shadowy, difficult emotions that we feel, all of us feel them because they are a part of consciousness. So let's allow that. Let's support that. Melissa's asking if she hears somebody say, I'm fine. She feels as that is expressing something more akin to I'm fragile, insecure, and not full and emotional. Yeah, me too. Fine is a 4-letter word, isn't it? We usually say fine when we're not fine. So as partners to each other in this process of awakening, if we can give ourselves and one another more permission to not be fine, to feel victim-y, to feel angry, hurt, etc. Oh my goodness, like that's a part of co-creating a world that I think all of us want more of, is the permission to be vulnerable, the permission to not be okay sometimes. This world is in a space where all of the not okayness that we've been hiding from a few years ago, the gig is up. We're not fine as a culture. We have so much pain and divisiveness and hatred and all of these things playing out. Give ourselves permission to feel that and admit that and to work with that and to be kind to each other through it. That's my invitation today. Yay, victim consciousness. Enough with trying to pretend that everything's good, all good when it isn't. Thank you for supporting this and for being kind to each other and our not okayness without losing the big picture awareness that, oh yeah, we got this. Everything's okay. Next week, I'm going to talk about something really yummy and controversial. We're going to bring in a discussion around cultural appropriation in plant medicine ceremonies and ask the question, should white people, Caucasian, non-indigenous people, should they be allowed to carry indigenous plant medicine lineages and teachings? So I'll see you next week. I love you all so much. Thank you for showing up, being here. Go feel. See you next time.